Greetings gamers, Tim here again, and today I wanted to talk about Game Design 101 Part 2. Starting with an idea, how does one get a role-playing game written and published? Now, there are a lot of methods and procedures and plans and different ways, especially with technology changing every day. So I'm going to start with the basic ideas of what I do to get the information together and move from that aspect to a finished product. First of all, from a game idea, where does one go? Different game designers go different places. Some begin with a blank page. Some begin with a pre-defined set of rules and modify that to fit a particular setting. Some of them will take somebody else's setting and write a set of rules for it. And in general, whichever method and whichever plan you do is probably going to work because you're the one who's doing it. However, you need to be aware of a few important things, or at least things I find important. One, research. Research, 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 and research. The reason I feel this is important is because anytime you put pen to paper about a setting or a genre, you need to know that information intimately. You need to know it so well that when somebody comes to your game book, they can see clearly how you fit those elements together to make a seamless whole, because game rules and game setting should work together. I know there are games that are generic or universal out there that people enjoy, but those always make certain particular assumptions about the kinds of genres they're going to be doing, thus basically end capping or sealing off other genres outside their reach. That doesn't mean they can't do that with changes or supplements, but at their core, they're going to need to be changed in order to do certain kinds of genres or settings. So I generally believe that the optimal game is setting plus system written together. Not everyone does, and that's okay, because we each have our own strengths and weaknesses. But as an example, for research, I read comic books for, let's see, I was 5. So I have read comic books for 36 years in some manner, some form, or some shape. Graphic novels, individual issues, web comics, and so on. So generally, when I sat down to write a superhero game, I am drawing upon that intense familiarity that I developed over the years, but I'm also going back and rereading many of those, the stories that moved me, the stories that impacted me, the stories that I feel are most iconic about superheroes. And not all of them, mind you, are comic books or graphic prints. I've been reading some superhero novels lately that manage to get the ideal of superheroes across, as well as some of the more visual medium. Now, that being said, that's something I've already done. So let's take a look at something I'm working on. I'm looking at a game that is space opera, but is also wushu. So when I get down to it, it's about kung fu, action movies, action novels, but it's set in a space operatic setting. And the reason for this is because I've heard Star Wars called kind of space wushu, but it really doesn't quite get all of those tropes. It's sort of a mishmash of its own unique takes on those ideas. And while there's nothing wrong with that at all, I enjoyed Star Wars, at least most of Star Wars. When I get down to it, I want to write something that is truly a wushu setting, just happens to be set in a space opera environment. Which means I have gone and I have picked up wushu novels, translated commentary on those novels, and been watching a lot of translated wushu movies as well. I unfortunately don't speak or read Chinese, making the amount of research I can do somewhat limited. And my attempts to find people who both speak Chinese and are familiar with the tropes has been rather limited, with more than 2 people I have talked to who started out helping and then, due to their life changes or environments, just couldn't anymore. This isn't to say, they're horrible people. Of course not. Life happens, and it draws you away from things you're interested in doing from time to time. But the important thing I'm trying to get at is I am doing research. I'm reading web pages. I'm reading wiki articles. But I'm not stopping at wiki articles because they're not always good research. A wiki article is a place to start. If you read its footnotes, you can then take those footnotes and investigate its references and see how much they line up with the wiki article and how much they add to the research you may want to do. I've checked out books from the library. I've library loaned. I do everything in my power to get the information I need to make sure that when I sit down and finally write this game, and I've been writing little bits here and there, mostly setting and ideas and research things I want to keep track of. But when I sit down to write the game in toto, in completion, from beginning to end, I have a very intimate knowledge of the genre and the setting I am wanting to do. And that means that I didn't just stick with Wushu. I also read a bunch of space opera. Now, I've been doing that as well because I've got a true hardcore space opera game in the works as well. I've got a lot of games in the works. Let's just say that and novels, and I'm always busy writing something if I'm feeling up to it. Now, after you have done your research, you can't put everything in a game. You can't take all that. So you have to collate it down into a few very hardcore ideas. And by few, I may be talking about 100 or 1,000 compared to the millions of potential differences you can do. Because there's always going to be fiction that do things slightly differently than the others in the same genre. There are also common tropes that many of those share, and sometimes they'll lampshade the trope, which is basically saying, haha, we see we did this, look here, we know it. And other times they will break that trope in order to try and be something different. But the important part is, do your research, pull out the ideas, use your critical reading skills, and pull out the core ideas that you feel are important elements to make your game. Because those are the building blocks that you are going to use to fashion rules, to fashion setting elements, and to set the tone for the game you are writing. Second, after research and collating it down, which I consider one aspect, and I touched on it before, be familiar with what else is out there. Because somebody may have done something similar before, and you don't want to step exactly in the same shoes they did. You want to do your own ground. Nobody really wants to climb a mountain in the exact same steps of the first mountain climber who went up there, unless they're intentionally writing a history book or intentionally trying to follow his particular path. If you want to climb your own mountain, create your own game, get familiar with both the research and other games in that environment, and then tread out on your own. Because creativity is important in role-playing games. And I have seen a lot that are sadly not very creative. They're very much, look, I saw something I liked in these 15 games and I combined them in a different way to create a new game. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not yours. Not at the core of it or the heart of it. It is not really something you have created of whole cloth yourself. It's not a bad thing either. I mean, believe me, some of the really good games come from pieces taken from elsewhere. But best game design practices are to pull this information and go your own path. That doesn't mean you can't look at other pieces and examine them for inspiration. Just don't whole cloth take chunks and drop it in with numbers filed off, in my opinion. You'll create a much more personalized, a much more your game situation. Now, after that, there are some things with game design you have to do. You have to sit down and write. And I do mean write. Write every day, write every week, write as much free time as you can to put it on paper. I mean, spend as much free time. Let me correct that confusing statement. Spend as much free time putting it on paper as possible. If you have to do it on notepads, if you have to do it on notebooks, if you have to take a laptop with you or a tablet, or if you have to record yourself talking, go somewhere and do that as much as you can. Get those ideas down. If you wake up in the middle of middle of the night with an idea, write it down, because that idea may be important later on. You may discard it, but it might be important. In addition to that, writing, which is the important part, writing, and researching. Don't be afraid to play test pieces of your game to see if they work before you have just completed the game. Because if you try out part A and it's not working well with part B, you can try it with different part Bs and then find the part B that fits best. You can take elements of your writing and rearrange them. You can write the entire game and come back and rewrite it from scratch once you've got the frame of reference down to do your outline and your mental space that's necessary. So write, and rewrite. But don't get too hung up on rewriting stuff so that you're stuck on the same page, on the same mechanic over and over and over again. Because I have that problem, especially with novels. I will rewrite the first page or the first chapter or whatever over and over again, trying to get it perfect. And there is no perfect. There's only good enough for everyone. Even the most creative, brilliant authors, there's only good enough, because we are our most critical enemies, unless we're insane, which sometimes is the case. So we're still our own worst enemies and insane. Those are important, and I think you need to look at them, is researching and writing. Now, I will cover more things later on, but once you get it written, we'll move to the next game design block. For now, I'm going to stop here because I've rambled on long enough, and I'll come back with another one in a week or two. Take care.